Hello and welcome to episode 66 of the Ski Podcast. We are supported by Switzerland Tourism and we're very grateful for them for helping us get this podcast out on a regular basis, which you can listen to on Spotify or your smart speaker. And don't forget to subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode. And I would like to thank all of our new listeners because quite a lot of have joined us over the last year, which is pretty good considering no one's actually skiing at the moment. And later on today, we're going to be covering when will Britons be able to ski next. We're going to talk a little bit about the Great Escape from Verbier and mention Wengen. There's a bit of Brit bashing going on at the moment. We've got the latest situation in Austria, what's going on there, a few resort updates, some Team GB news. And also, I'm talking to Graham Bell about Dancing on Ice, which starts this weekend as we're recording now. But I'd like to start by welcoming our guest today. And I have Abi Butcher, who is a freelance journalist and editor of Where to Ski and Snowboard. I think that's right, isn't it, Abi? How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks, Ian. Yes, and you've got that right.
Excellent. And we've also got Abi Butcherworth with us, who is a director of Kaluma Travel and based down in St Anton. How are you, Andy?
Very well, thanks, Ian. Very cold. As we just said before we kind of went live, we're currently sat in, I think, the biggest snowstorm certainly this side of the Alps has seen in many a year. So yeah, there's a ton of snow outside, quite literally a ton of snow. But all very well.
Excellent. Well, I mean, my next question is always, when did you last ski? Now, we were chatting in the green room, Andy, about that. So go on, make us all jealous. You told us you got a lot of snow there. When were you last skiing?
Well, thankfully, a lot of the resorts in Austria have decided to open for locals. I say a lot, a fair couple of handfuls of resorts have decided to open for locals only. So they're only selling season passes to registered locals or to day trippers within the area, which have to be or should be Austrian. So I skied 2 days ago in possibly some of the deepest snow I've ever actually skied in. It was quite literally. In the right little pockets was waist chest deep. In the very nice parts just off the side of the piste, it was sort of knee deep. It was lovely snow.
I think you've heard enough.
I don't mean to rub it in any way at all. I genuinely mean that, but it has been. We're very lucky, very privileged that the lifts are open.
To put that into context, Andy, I mean, you've been in St Anton for how many years?
20 years in St Anton and 23 in Austria now.
And you're suggesting that this is some of the deepest, the most snow you've ever seen?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is, which is sort of that perfect storm of amazing snow and superb conditions and no tourists. But yeah, it's I remember back in 98, 99 when all those avalanches in Austria.
Yes.
There was all over the news, and that was a lot of snow, but over probably like a 4 or 5 week period. This, I think, absolutely tops that as the most snow in a 72-hour period I can ever remember.
Okay, we'll chat a bit more about the latest situation in Austria a bit later on. But Abi, I'm guessing it wasn't 2 days ago. When did you last go skiing?
No. Well, I squeezed a trip in at the very, very last minute. I went to Courchevel the week. In fact, I left on the Saturday and France closed down at midnight that night in March. So I pushed it to the wire. And I remember actually I was with there was a very random selection of sort of ski journalist friends and buddies. And there was about 8 of us hooning around the slopes that day. And we were with one friend who's doing up a barn, turning it into a chalet in France, and he's like, "Oh no, we're not going to get locked down anyway. We'll be fine here." And then, literally 6 hours later, boom. So it's a very strange feeling. I've not been in the UK for this amount of time, or I've never left the UK. I've never stayed in the UK in January for many, many years. It's funny hearing how much snow there is in the Alps, and
yeah, it's very frustrating, isn't it? It would be the kind of
I've
the
tried
perfect
not to
season. It would be the perfect season when we're not able to travel out there. But let's have a little chat about that. I mean, when do we think we are going to be able to ski next? We're obviously in lockdown in the UK at the moment. And indeed, I think in lockdown in Austria, even though the lifts are open, and we're going to be talking about when Austria might open up in general, but certainly in France, you mentioned you're in Courchevel. In France, the next decision is going to be coming in on the 20th of January, the possibility of a 30th of January opening. It kind of seems unlikely looking at the way the caseload is going in France. Any thoughts on that, Abi? Do you have any inside information when France might open up?
No inside information, except that my contacts in France are very worried about the situation if their half-term, if the French half-term trade gets wiped out. That's sort of another significant nail in the coffin for them, and lots of small businesses. I know I've got great friends who are mountain guides and doing various things like that, and it's those guys that and the small B&Bs and the like in the UK. It's the small businesses that are really going to struggle if half term isn't allowed in some shape or form. But having said that, unless France gets its vaccination program better up and running, I don't know how they're going to be in a position to do so. I think
initially what they had said was that if the rate of infections went down to a certain level, which might be 5,000 or something like that, then they would see the possibility of the resorts opening. And they obviously have all of the hygiene measures in place, ready to go. And of course, as France Montagne like to point out, skiing is actually the only outdoors activity that is banned. You can go running, you can go cycling, you can do any of these other things. And obviously, if you go to ski resort now, I had a slightly peeved by Ski Sunday, which started again this week, when Ed Lee said that all French ski resorts were closed, because they're not closed. The lifts are actually closed. Mm-hmm. There's lots of things you can actually do, and there have been people going out there, whether it's hiking or ski touring, plenty of people doing that, cross-country skiing, etc. But it does seem a bit unlikely that it's going to open even for French people in February. And for Brits, God knows whether we'll be going out to the Alps at all this winter. I'd say 50-50 for Easter, perhaps.
Yeah, that's similar feeling, I think. I don't know. I really don't know. I wish I was clairvoyant and I could tell. I mean, I started off this season and I've written quite a lot about how determined I am to try and ski without being branded as the media like to, and Twitter likes to brand skiers selfish and irresponsible. But as you say, with the resorts having all the measures in place that they do, and they spend a lot of money in the same way that our hospitality trade has here, and speaking, especially when I was covering all the Verbier stuff, speaking to resorts and people in resort and finding out how everything is being managed, I think done correctly, it's a very, very low risk. It comes down to everybody else's, it's your personal responsibility, isn't it? And how you personally behave. But I certainly, if the UK lifts its ban on non-essential travel, I shall definitely go, because I think that people need to, we need to see that there can be some trust in travel and trust in skiing, and it's not this witch's cauldron.
I don't think there will be any shortage of people who want to go. There have been a bunch of surveys where people have been asked, will they travel if quarantine was lifted, for example. And in fact, I do some work for Les Trois Vallées on Twitter. And someone responded to one of the tweets the other day saying, well, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll have a vaccine or I'll have a test, whatever it is. I just want to get out to the Alps. So there's a whole bunch of people who will do that. But you did mention just then that the Verbier and British people or skiers in general getting a knocking. Now, sometimes, that is entirely deserved. And there was actually a tweet sent by a guy who works for Eurostar the other day. Someone had turned up to London St Pancras with their skis to travel out to Switzerland. No, that is pretty dumb, really, given that we're in a full lockdown, and quite hard to argue their case. Although I did think, well, if they're prepared to go into quarantine, but then I wonder what the rules are about travelling across France. However, British people have been getting a bit of a knocking, and in the last kind of 24 to 48 hours, it's been blame put onto an individual British skier in Wengen who, has been pitched with the responsibility for the cancellation of the Lauberhorn downhill, and it's moving to Austria. There's an article today in the Telegraph, the headline is "We don't blame the British. Swiss locals react." And you might remember Alex Moore, who I interviewed in the last episode. It's written by her in episode 65. She is in Wengen at the moment. Now, this isn't, I don't have any second source for this, but as I understand it, the person that they're accusing of being the super spreader arrived in resort before quarantine was in place, so they didn't need to quarantine, and tested positive on the 23rd. So they'd already been in resort for 13 days. So I'm not entirely sure that they obviously caught it in resort. So it might be a bit of Brit bashing, which brings us back to the Great Escape from Verbier, which is something we mentioned in the last episode. And this was something that was exaggerated a lot. It was, clickbait and lies, lots of headlines about, this mass escape under the cover of darkness. And the only person, I think, Abi, who covered it in any detail and looked into what really happened was yourself. And I'd be really interested to know how
that came about.
Well, how that journey came about, what prompted you, and how you actually sourced the facts.
Well, I work very closely with the Telegraph. I do a lot of work for them, and a friend who is an editor there rang me the morning of the headlines came out, and said, what do you think about this? And we were sort of debating it. And I said, it sounds odd. But then, at the time, the news was also here full of second homeowners that had gone down to Cornwall. And, London Range Rovers were seen driving around the lanes of Cornwall. So sort of thought it wasn't beyond the realms of possibility. So he said, could you make some calls for us? Because the travel desk are going to probably want something. So I've been going to Verbier. God, I did a season there when I'd left school. And I have lots and lots of friends there over the years that I've met in different corners of the world just by coincidence. And it's somewhere that I go every year and I know very well. And I consequently know a lot of hoteliers and chefs and people from all walks of life that aren't connected to the tourist office.
Yeah.
So I started phoning around and texting friends, and everybody said they didn't know anybody who knew anyone who'd left.
So just to put that into context, the original headline, I think, was saying that 400 British people had escaped under the cover of darkness, right?
Yeah. And for that amount of people to leave, somebody would know something.
It's like a mass exodus.
I phoned friends who would have no stake in Verbier spinning a good PR story, or they had no what's the word I'm looking for? They would have no
allegiance.
And so then I started to literally phone, and I phoned Marcus Ratter, who I know, and he said, look, from my hotels, the situation is we don't have many Brits here, and the two families that we do or the two sets of guests that we do are quarantining, and they've just extended their stay. I don't know anyone that's left. And so it went on, and I started the only strange thing, which I think is a reflection on how the media has been operating, is that a couple of the chalet operators that I phoned actually put the phone down on me. And there were British operators out there, and they didn't want to speak. And it was, sorry, I've got a call coming through, and slam the phone down. And I followed that up with an email saying, I'm really trying to get the truth out there, and this is what I'm ascertaining, but I want to make sure it's not happened in chalets where it would be a bit easier for people to skedaddle. But then I got through to some who have got chalet guests out there, and they confirmed, and so it went on, and that was research for the Telegraph, but then it sort of turned into research for myself. And LBC rang me at 3:00 in the afternoon. Oh, can you do our evening bulletins? It's a really funny story, isn't it? And at that point, I'd spoken to no, and Warren Smith was getting quite emotional about it and saying, I had 30 clients out from the UK, 2 have gone home on the invitation of the authorities. And then I managed to, I got hold of a dentist who spoke to me on the record and said, because he and his wife is a research scientist, and they'd checked everything out. It's their business to make sure they're operating within government regulations. And he had actually looked on the Federal Office of Public Health website and seen the directive that said, if you want to go home, there is a window allowing you to do so, but he decided to quarantine. So
yeah, and I think that's a key issue that was missed. I have a feeling it was a Swiss newspaper that did the original story, but the issue in both Wengen and Verbier, so the Valais and the is it Graubünden canton, where Wengen, both allowed people to leave. But really, it was this story that, hundreds of people had left, and it made it sound like the Great Escape was how, I visualized it. You almost imagine people digging under the border of the resort or the hotel to get out, fleeing with these ridiculous phrases, under the cover of darkness. I mean, that just means if someone did leave, they left during the night because they wanted to drive all the way to Calais in one go.
Yeah. It's like a line of cars winding down the valley.
Exactly.
It was absurd. What I still haven't had an answer from, and where the grey area lies, is that we don't know when that window was announced and how it was announced. The dentist saw it. Some people saw it. I spoke to a lawyer who was in a different resort in Valais, who couldn't find any official information. He could only find a bit of a nod towards it. And took a gamble to get out, and the Swiss still haven't confirmed to me, despite me asking them several times. I admit I haven't phoned them. I've because the news agenda moves on, and I should be a bit more dogged about it. But they haven't said when the window was announced and what exact dates it was.
Yeah, well, unfortunately,
I don't know if there's any back covering.
Yeah, as you say, the news agenda moves on, and people forget. People only see the headlines. Shortly after, I shared a couple of headlines from different newspapers. One was from The Guardian. The headline is "Only about 12 Britons stay in quarantine in Swiss ski resort after hundreds flee." 4 days later, we have the same story in The Independent, which says Swiss police investigate 12 Britons who fled ski resort quarantine. It's completely flipped the story. It's not hundreds of people. It turns out to be 12, but people don't remember that. And Brits get a kicking, and skiers get a kicking as well. And as you mentioned earlier about Twitter, Twitter's always been a place where people can get into arguments really quickly. But wow, Twitter's become really, I don't know. It probably hasn't become really aggressive, but their opinions on social media can be very virulent against skiers. But let's move on to something more positive. Andy, you were telling us all about your amazing snow that you've got in Austria, and a lot of our focus on the podcast has been what's been going on in France and Switzerland. But what is the story in Austria? You told us that the lifts are open. How long have they been open for?
24th of December. I think all the different regions in Austria that have ski resorts in were given the option. So the region, rather than the actual national government, could decide if they were going to allow resorts to open. And then if they gave the okay for resorts to open, it was, when I say resorts open, I mean just the lifts just for locals. It was then broken down into this more smaller sub-regions and actual resorts to whether they wanted to open or not. Luckily, St Anton was one of the regions that were allowed to open, and I think a lot of debate, a lot of back and forth, a lot of speculation and rumours whether they would or wouldn't, and then they made the decision, I think, around about the 20th of December that they would open on the 24th of December, with the various rules in place. That it was, you could only buy a lift pass, you could only buy a day ticket unless you were a local or like a resident, and you had all the permits to say you're a resident. Then you could buy a season pass, but they were only going to sell day passes, not week passes, just day passes, to Austrians, to people within, it was meant to be within like a radius where you could feasibly and realistically get back home after a day skiing. How true that's been, I don't know. There's certainly been any
evidence of people policing it?
Certainly with the season passes, getting a season pass, you definitely been policed. You had to prove, you had to have all the proof in place that you were a local. I'm not sure how well policed it's been in terms of only selling day tickets or only selling to Austrians. There's been quite a large number of other nationality cars in car parks, which I think is probably people who have second homes or holiday homes here, which I'm pretty sure is the same in, a lot of the bigger resorts in the Courchevels, the Verbiers, the Meribels and Val d'Isère and Chamonix. It's people who've had, second homes, have just skedaddled and come somewhere maybe a little bit nicer and with some snow where you can perhaps ski. So that's allowed, as far as I know, as long as those people have done the correct quarantining and had the test. If it's your registered residents, you're allowed to do it. So yeah, there's it's still up in the air. I think there's all the talk that the lift companies must be losing hundreds of thousands a day by just operating, when literally I've skied on a couple of occasions and you've seen maybe 7 or 8 people on the mountain, literally just 7 or 8 people on the whole mountain. Wow. So they must be losing money hand over fist, or they must have got some government help. So all the rumours now are that now the Women's World Cup race is finished, and over the attention, like the spotlight isn't on St Anton, there's a fair chance the lifts might close, or they might close certain parts of it, or they might just open for weekends, which I think they're doing in Kitzbühel now as well.
Yes, but talking about opening, I believe there's a decision coming up soon as to whether or not all resorts might be given permission to open their lifts. So this is more about Austria coming out of lockdown, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, again, tons of speculation. The official lockdown finishes or the current lockdown finishes on the 24th of January. I think there's an announcement today or this evening as to what's happening in regards to that lockdown, which everyone is expecting it to be extended. So I don't think anyone's expecting to have anything open on the 25th of January. It's just literally waiting to see how long that next lockdown is going to last for.
Hi there, this is Ian, just interjecting because Andy was completely right. Since we recorded, there was an announcement saying that the lockdown in Austria is going to be extended until the 7th of February, and then they'll see what the situation is, with the idea that shops will be opened after that, and they'll try and open restaurants if numbers allow, but there won't be any hotels opening until March at the earliest.
Okay, but lockdown in a town where you can go skiing every day sounds pretty good to me. I quite like that.
It's quite surreal to try and explain to friends and family back home that we started on the 24th of December. We started on a strict hard lockdown, which on the 26th of December. They started a very strict hard lockdown with all these rules that you're only supposed to be outside for essential exercise, essential shopping, or visiting a doctor. Walking a dog, that kind of stuff. You're only allowed to socialise with one other person outside of your family at a time, and that has to be outside. Yet you can go and sit on a gondola with 12 other people. You can meet all your mates on top of a mountain and go skiing. It's quite strange to try and explain it.
Yeah, I mean okay. So I mean, in terms of the measures that are in place on lifts, we've had lots of discussion about how that's working in Switzerland currently, where they have reduced capacity on the kind of enclosed or on all lifts, and you have to wear masks on all lifts. What's the situation in Austria in relation to that?
So it's pretty strict, and from what I've seen and heard, not just St Anton but the other resorts that are open, everybody is sticking very, very strictly to the rules because everyone wants it to stay open. No one wants them to close the lift. It's sort of like a real sanity booster, that the fact that you can go on the mountain. So you have to wear an FFP2 mask, is that right? So you have to have one of those masks on the lift, and they are policed. So the lifties are looking that you have got your mask on. You can't just have your snood up over your face or your jacket pulled up. You have to have the mask on when you go on when you go into the lift queue and then onto the lift. On the chairlifts, so like a 6-person chairlift will have 3 people on it. A 4-person chairlift will have 2 people on it. If it's got the bubble that pulls down over it, those are the rules. If it doesn't have a little bubble that you pull over, you can actually have 4 people on a 4-person lift because it's classed as outside. On the big gondolas, so the big Gautsigbahn, for example, takes about 50 people. It's a maximum of 12 people on there.
Right.
It's meant to be socially distanced seats. There's signs up all over the place. Every time the gondolas go through the top station, there's a guy there spraying it all with, I'm guessing, with the disinfectants to clear it all. You've got to keep the windows open in the gondolas or enclosed spaces all the time. And that's the main crux of it. There's special lines, that lines have been put out, so you can't, I mean, not that there are literally any queues at all, but the lines are very clearly defined where you can't stand in a line right next to the person in front of you.
Right, and in relation to the ski area itself then, I mean, I think you said already that it's pretty quiet out there. I mean, how much of the area is open? Have you got the entire Arlberg region to yourself?
Pretty much, yeah. It is nuts. So I think there's 88 odd lifts in the Arlberg. I think there's about 12 or 14 open. So it's not huge. And most of those lifts are in St Anton. Lech and Zers only have about 4 or 5 lifts, like between the two resorts, where St Anton is probably on about 8 or 10 lifts, which is great. All the pieces are lovely groomed, flat, nice. It's lovely skiing.
Yeah, let's not. And you've got the best snow for 25 years in this stage. Well, I hate to bring it back to anything negative again, but I have been reading this week about an outbreak in Jochberg, which is, I believe, somewhere near Kitzbühel. Now, that has been, linked to British ski instructors as well. Do you know anything about that at all?
I know that. I mean, I think it'd be pretty harsh to blame it on an outbreak on British skiers and ski instructors. I do know that Kitzbühel, the Bergbahn, the lift company, there released a statement the other day that they were quite upset, I think, with the amount of particularly Germans who were coming over the border, which is only about an hour away from Kitzbühel, and Kitzbühel and the surrounding areas, Jochberg, Reith, and all around there, very well known for the jet set of Munich, kind of have their second homes or holiday homes down there. And by all accounts, there was lots and lots of tourists or people who shouldn't have been there from Germany in and around the resort through the Christmas New Year period, to the point where the Bergbahn, the lift company, have changed the rules. I think they're only opening on certain days and for certain times, and now they've closed a number of lifts, which is a real shame. I would be pretty sure that those ski instructors were probably there a lot longer and before the influx of the German tourists. As to how an outbreak happened, I've no idea.
That is very interesting to hear about the Austrian situation, Andy. Let's hear from some other resorts. We got Alf, who was in episode 64, who sent us through this report from Les Arcs.
Basically, the conditions right now are very good in Les Arcs. I was out ski touring this morning, had one of the best powder runs I've ever had above Villaroja. In sort of perfect powder, knee deep in places. Sunshine was out, temperature about -4, but of course you could only get to it on foot. And there are quite a few people out ski touring. That said, the avalanche danger is very high at the moment. I think it's around 4. So you do need to be cautious. As far as the lifts are concerned, no one's too optimistic about the moment anytime soon. There's supposed to be another announcement from the government on Wednesday, when we hopefully will have some idea of what might be happening in the next few weeks. But most of the locals don't seem very optimistic, which is not good news for most people. But obviously, if you're travelling out from the UK, it doesn't make a lot of difference since you can't actually travel out from the UK. But even though the conditions are good, there isn't a huge amount of snow on the slopes compared to a good winter. And some of the stuff higher up has been quite windblown as well. So that obviously makes things even more tricky as far as the avalanche conditions are concerned. So were we actually able to use the lifts, I think we would be actually hoping or wanting a little bit more snow than there has been as yet. And it is supposed to warm up in the next 2 or 3 days, certainly lower down the mountain. They're forecasting rain, snow obviously higher up. And then I think cooling down a little bit towards the end of the week and possibly quite a heavy fall of snow, which will obviously make conditions pretty good higher up. And hopefully we'll get a bit of that snow lower down. But right now, ski touring is the only option, or snowshoeing, which is becoming increasingly popular. Apparently most of the shops down in Bourg-Saint-Maurice have sold out of ski touring gear. And so you need to bring your own out if you can get out here.
Hey Ian, it's Al here from Alleycats. I thought I'd drop you a quick line to let you know how things are looking in Morzine. We have had from a snow perspective, one of the best starts, ironically, that we've ever had to a ski season. The snow, we had good snowfall in December, and following some very cold and very stable temperatures for the last 2 or 3 weeks, the snowpack has become really very good. There's still plenty of fresh soft snow, even though the last snowfall hasn't been for about 10 days. And it's been a long time, many, many years, since I can remember a period that's been so sustained and so cold and stable for so long, which has meant that ski touring out here has been really, really good. I've not seen as many people engaged and into the sport as I have done this year. It's just such a shame that we can't have our lovely customers and friends from the UK out to enjoy it with us. The latest on the resort opening is that we need to wait until the end of January for a further announcement from the French government. The numbers aren't currently where they need to be. I think they originally said that they need to be down at around 5,000 new cases per day, and currently they're on a 7-day rolling average. They're more like 15,000, 16,000 per day. So it's not looking great, but we're crossing our fingers and hoping that something can be done in a limited way to get the season going. Over New Year actually Morzine was very busy. Lots of local French people coming from the cities and towns to escape, and were snowshoeing, walking, just enjoying being in the mountains. And it was really lovely to see so many people just wanting to be in our resort, in the resort of Morzine, and enjoying the surroundings, despite the fact that there were no lifts running. And that kind of, for those of us who live here and run businesses here year round, that was really nice to see. So to summarise, we are enjoying the snow, and there's more on its way. I think the next snowfall is due tomorrow, and it's going to snow for 2 or 3 days. But we would really love to be able to have everyone here to enjoy it with us, and we're crossing our fingers that might happen some point in February, March.
And that was Al Judge from Alleycats in Morzine. He appeared on our electric vehicles special. I don't have any audio from Alex in Courchevel, but he's been ski touring again. You can have a look at 150 Days of Winter on YouTube to see how he's been getting on. Just one small point in relation to Courchevel. We meant back in episode 33, we referred to the fire that happened there, where some season workers were living in accommodation. And in fact, that inquest has been completed now, and they found that all of those season workers were living illegally, and the owner of that property is going to be imprisoned. It was their responsibility. And the irony is, you had a load of ski workers packed into a tiny area above a Chanel shop. that probably is Courchevel in microcosm right there.
So it sounds like my season in Maribel 20 years ago.
Yeah, sadly though, this was only 2 years ago when it happened.
Mm.
More positively, some Team GB news. I'd like to congratulate Dave Riding, who's appeared on the show a few times. He picked up his third World Cup podium last weekend when he came third in the slalom in Adelboden. And he was super close to getting higher. I think he was 100th of a second off silver. And even more encouraging, Laurie Taylor, who's also appeared on the show before, who you might say is the up-and-coming slalom skier. He came first in a Europa Cup race, which is, you might think of that as being the championship to the World Cup Premiership. So that's really good as well and very encouraging. We do have, I'm delighted to say, an update from Jasmin Taylor, who actually, she's had over 30 World Cup podiums in her discipline of telemark, and she appeared in episode 60. We also had a special, and she sent us this.
Hi, this is Jasmin Taylor. Ian asked me to record a short update on my training and what I've been up to. I'm currently out in France in Les Ouches, and although the lifts are closed, we have been lucky enough to do some training over in Flaine, and that's with the French team. So of course elite teams are still able to carry on with their training. So yeah, that's been really fortunate and a lifesaver actually. But that aside, we've managed to do some cross-country skiing. So the cross-country pistes are actually open in Chamonix, so plenty of intervals, stepping turns and technical drills on the cross-country skis and telemark skis in order to prepare for the competitions. The competitions start later this month, and we kick off with the first World Cup event in Germany in the resort of Obiok, followed by Slovenia, where we ski in Kravovec. And we'll have 4 days of competition in each resort, so a total of 8 races at the end of the month, which is exciting. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to all my sponsors that continue to support me: Blossom, Scarpa, the M Equipment, Lecky, all those guys that, you know, really make such a big difference, and especially at this really difficult time for everybody. It's amazingly generous of them to continue the support, and of course it wouldn't be possible without those guys. So just a huge thank you, and a special shout out to the Ladies Ski Club, the Kandahar Ski Club, all those guys as well. It just means that we can keep training, keep doing what we love. So thank you to everybody, and I hope everybody stays safe, well, and manages to get in some skiing very soon.
On Team GB, I've got an interview with Graham Bell coming up about his dancing on ice, but I just want to move on to ski hire just now. I'm just going to play this little bit of audio from Intersport. This is how ski hire is going to be working in the new normal. It's going to be a little bit different.
Quick COVID update. Rent with Intersport using Option Zen and get a no questions asked full refund up to 24 hours before pickup. And when you visit our stores, expect free sanitizing gel masks and for your equipment to be serviced and disinfected. And with our virtual queuing system, we'll minimize your time in store, maximize the social distancing rules, and give you time to grab a coffee while we prepare your rental.
Andy, when I spoke to you in the green room beforehand, you mentioned that hire shops in Austria, in St Anton, they're open for hiring skis. They're not open for buying skis. Is that right?
No, that's right. Yeah, the shops were allowed to open initially when the lifts opened. So the shops could all open, and I'm sure they were very grateful for it initially, because there was a bit of a surge just before Christmas and people buying Christmas presents and getting all the new ski gear. And certainly when before the lifts had opened, all the touring gear, which became the new trend. But the shops, with no tourists, the shops are just the same as every other, hotel and chalet company and chalet operator and, taxi company, everyone else. They rely on the tourism, and there was just nobody going in the shops. And the rules changed that shops had to close, but they're allowed to keep open their rental department. So you've got these, quite big sport shops right on side of the piece from the middle of town where, that they're open, but only to go downstairs and rent some skis. They're not supposed to buy anywhere. And I think you're allowed to buy if it's a click and collect. So if you go online and buy something online, you can then click and collect and go and pick it up from the shop, but they're not supposed to sell anything in the shops.
Okay, well, that's going to be a challenge for all of them, because I do know that for hire shops, typically the hire is just one aspect of the income, and when someone comes into the shop and hires, they end up typically spending more on other things as well. And I think for Intersport, hopefully we'll get the opportunity to use them and test them again before the end of the season. But I do know that a lot of the local shops, there's an advantage there that they're part of that big retailer, and they're actually doing quite well as a company, Intersport, because they're selling loads of lockdown fitness equipment, and they've been supporting those rental shops. I would like to just quickly mention the podcast survey, which is out at the moment. You can find out how to give your feedback on social media and in show notes. Basically, what I'm asking for is I'm trying to find out from you, listener, what you'd like to have more of and what you'd like to have less of in the course of the show. And it's been open for about a week, 2 weeks already. There's a bag of swag of Three Valleys stuff with beanies and headbands and buffs and things like that that you can win, or someone's going to win from whoever sends your feedback. And just to give you a little insight, at the moment, you can't please everyone, can you? But people have said so far they'd like to see more of the specials. They'd like to have more athlete interviews. Sadly, a couple of people have said they'd like to have less sustainability and green issues. That's sad for me, because that's one of my areas of interest. But I want to make sure that the show delivers what listener you want to listen to. And a lot of debate as to how long the show should be. Now, typically we try and get it to be around 60 minutes, and the special was around 30 minutes. But just proving that you can't please everybody, so far, 22% of people said they would like it to be 30 minutes. 41% of people want it to be 60 minutes, and 27% of people are quite happy for it to be an hour and a half or longer. So that would be a long time.
That's a lot of talking.
That's a lot of talking, exactly. But clearly, there are a lot of different listeners out there, and everyone has their own thing. I think that's probably a vote of confidence. If people do want to listen for an hour and a half, hopefully the content is kind of interesting. But it does take a lot of time. The reason I'm asking is it does take a lot of time to prepare and record and edit and publish the show and all the special episodes. And, I want to make sure that it includes what people want to listen to. And, while I'm very grateful to supporters like Switzerland Tourism, I don't go anywhere near covering the time it takes me to put together the show. So I have actually introduced something. If you like the show, listener, you can now buy me a coffee. I hadn't come across this until recently, but there's a site called Buy Me a Coffee. And if you go to buymeacoffee.com/the ski podcast, you can literally buy me a coffee. Although in my case, it would be a cup of tea because I don't drink coffee. But have a look for that in the show notes. Right. Another special we released last week was an interview with Graham Bell about dancing on ice. And I actually caught up with him yesterday because the show is starting this weekend, just to find out how his final preparations are going.
I'm joined today by Graham Bell, and Graham is just about to start his Dancing on Ice journey. We interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. How are you today, Graham?
Well, it feels like the journey started months ago. We're about to start the sharp end. In fact,
I guess it did start months ago. The training's been going for a long time, but I think in this final week,
long road. It's been a long road to get
final
to
week
point.
Leading up to competition. There's been quite a dramatic incident. Do you want to talk us through that?
Yeah, well, you talk about the sharp end. I had a fall. We were skating together, me and my partner Yebin Mock. I fell on my stomach and I was sliding forward. It was an innocuous fall. It wasn't, anything spectacular. But she tripped behind me and came down on the back of my skate. The heel that sticks up at the back,
right,
and it sliced into her shin, and it was deep, quite
Ouch.
Deep into her shin.
So what's happening now?
So she went off and she actually had an operation on it to stitch it up. Luckily, there's no nerve damage, no tendon damage, didn't damage the bone. So it's going to be, they said 2 weeks before she gets the stitches out. And then it's just a question of how quickly she can get back up to speed on ice and be competitive. But it's anywhere kind of, I think, 3 to 4 weeks. So means that she can't do our first 2 performances. So in order to give me more time to start working with the stand-in, a skater called Karina Manta, who's American, who's been training with a reserve celebrity. And I've got a week to learn my routine for week 1, my routine if I end up in a skate off, and then start working on week 3.
Okay.
Because what happens is I'm not actually in week 1. I've moved to week 2 because they split 1 and 2.5. So it's given me.
You've been working on your initial routine with Yebin for quite some time. So presumably the routine you're doing with Karina is that same routine. Is that right?
Being able to. There's a lot that's packed in there, but the tricks are, they're quite spectacular, but they're not technically that difficult for a pro. And so Karina's been able to pick them up quite quickly. It's just a question of just learn the steps, basically.
And the format is then in week 1, half of the couples dance and one of them will go into that dance off. And then in week 2, when you'll be taking part, that's when you get your opportunity. And then one couple goes into the dance off as well. So potentially, obviously, you don't want to be in the dance off at all, but potentially there's a slight advantage being in week 2.
No, I think there's an advantage being in week 1 because you get a whole week to prepare then for the dance off. And if you're not in the dance off, it gives you another week to prepare for week 3. So we were really happy being in week 1, and we were kind of riding high. We were thinking, you know what, we're kind of one of the front runners here. It's us, it's Joe Warren Plant and Vanessa. It's Faye Brooks and Hamish. Those are the ones that we're looking at, and Rebecca Vardy as well. We're in that top 4, and then all of a sudden, boom! You think you're flying high, and then suddenly we're fighting to survive.
Yeah, but I believe, Graham, you possibly have a secret weapon on your side, which might be the music that you've got for your first dance. Are you allowed to reveal what that is yet?
Yeah, well, it's a tune I know very, very well. Yeah, it's the theme tune to Ski Sunday. So it's a fantastically popular piece of music, which is great. It's a fun piece of music. And if you listen to it closely, there's just so many kind of musical kind of punchlines all the way through it, which is great if you're doing a performance to it, because it means you can hit those musical, moments. And that's kind of what we're working on, is getting those so that we're in the right spot at the right time to hit those kind of da-da-duns.
Yeah, great. Well, I reckon there'll be an emotional benefit for that as well with the voters, because everybody knows that theme tune. It's been going for so long. And how about the costume then? Do you know your costume yet? Because you kind of referred to that before. You're a bit concerned about what you might end up with.
I've not seen it yet,
right.
But I think it's going to be figure hugging. I think it'll be a catsuit of some sort. It's got to be, hasn't it?
Okay, of course, yeah. Okay, that I guess that makes sense. Right, so all in then, you've got one more week to prepare to build up that relationship with Karina, and and then all the best. So we'll be watching you on TV on about I don't know by calendar, the 23rd of January, Saturday the 23rd. Is that the right day?
Sunday the 24th. So it's
Sunday the 24th.
The weekend.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Well, perfect lockdown viewing, I would say. And hopefully you'll get some big audiences with people with few other alternatives going on. So if you want to support Graham in Dancing on Ice,
download the app.
And and tune in on the 24th of January.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting interview. In case you didn't hear it, Abi and Andy, there was an accident last week. Graham fell over and his partner cut herself on his ice skates and has had to have stitches. So he has a temporary dance partner until she's able to take part again. And I've never watched Dancing on Ice, but I'm actually going to watch it this time around. Certainly to start off with. Another thing he revealed in that interview, that in the first episode that he's in, he's going to be dancing to the Ski Sunday theme tune.
Very unlike Graham to be cheesy.
Oh yeah, I was going to say he's a very accident-prone man. The one and only time I've skied with Graham was in Salbach, and on I think it was a Saturday night. It was a very unraucous Saturday night. Everyone was comparing their war wounds, and he dropped his trousers and showed everyone his ACL scars.
Well, what are we going to say then?
I felt a bit lost because I didn't have one, and lo and behold, the next day, the first run down, I slipped and snapped my ACL.
Oh my God! Okay.
He's not my good omen, so I hope he does better.
Well, his show is going to be on Sunday, the 23rd of January. If you want to watch it, have you ever seen Dancing on Ice? Either of you?
Well, brief glimpses.
Yeah, but briefly, a few episodes or a few series ago, I watched a few.
Yeah, well, it could be great lockdown viewing. I'm certainly going to see how Graham performs, and he is quite optimistic about it. Thinks might do okay, so we'll see.
Good luck to him.
I'm just going to mention a couple of reviews. We've had lots of comments coming in the survey, so listeners, thank you for those. But Matt Hayes, he says, "Love the podcast, keep it coming." Thank you, Matt. Dan King said, "Great work, Ian. Keep it up." Thank you, Dan. And Luke Simpson said, "Love the podcast. It's great to hear ski talk, especially at this frustrating time when we should all be enjoying the slopes but can't." And having listened to Andy describe the snow in St Anton, I think we can all relate to that.
I always feel a bit guilty, I think, when we post like the nice pictures and the amazing snow and unbelievable powder and all that kind of stuff. And it does feel sometimes like we're gloating, but I think it's also like quite important to say that like these resorts are so quiet. They are like ghost towns. They are shells of their former selves, and they, as much as people might be missing the snow and missing the skiing, I can guarantee you that the resorts are definitely missing the people. It's a pretty sad time for the whole industry, but these resorts are yearning for people to come back to them.
Yeah, and while we can't guarantee that we're going to get the same snow conditions again, those mountains aren't going to go away, and they're always going to stay there. So there will be # we will ski again. I also just wanted to mention some more feedback about alpine cooking, which is a book that was mentioned a couple of episodes ago by Meredith Erickson. We mentioned it, I think, in episode 64. And Deborah Stevenson contacted us and said, "This is a great book. It's much more than just the recipes. There's loads of insight into the regions and history as well. And her favourite is the abondance salad." So I think I'm going to have to get myself a copy of Alpine Cooking.
What was that salad called?
The Abondance salad. It's a little village just down from Châtel in the Port de Soleil ski area, I think.
Lovely to hear people's stories of how they're recreating. They can't go to the Alps, but what they're doing to kind of get that alpine feeling at home. Because I've seen a few sort of fondues and alpine cooking events on Instagram and that sort of thing, and I think we're all holding that torch, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, Matt Hayes was the first person who brought it to our attention, and he says he thinks it's got the best recipe ever for tartiflette in it. So if you're looking for a good tartiflette to get you through the winter, that could help. Finally, I just want to mention a campaign which has been recently started by TTG, which is Travel Trade Gazette, an industry publication, and they have created a mental health hub. Now, I think, I'd like to kind of discuss this further, but I don't think we have the time in this episode. But, the pandemic has been very tough on the travel industry. And, many of us working in it have found it very difficult. Personally, I've struggled with my own mental health in the last year. And I think one of the difficulties is when you're in an industry where you've got this relentless negativity coming in, you can't do this and you can't do that. And Andy, you talk about local businesses closing, etc. So all I wanted to do was really just to mention it. And I know a lot of people who work in the travel industry do listen to the podcast. Have a look at the show notes for the link, or have a search for #GetTravelTalking on Twitter. To finish off, coming up next time, our next episode will probably be in a couple of weeks' time. I'm going to be including an interview in that with Peter Hardy, who is a veteran ski journalist who's been working in skiing for longer than most of us have been skiing. I'm still hoping that we're going to interview Ed Lee. Don't forget you can support the podcast by buying me a cuppa at buymeacoffee.com. And otherwise, thanks for listening. You can follow me at Skipedia and the show at the Ski Podcast on Twitter and Facebook and theskipodcast.com. I'd like to thank my guests, Andy and Abi, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
No problem. And I'd like to thank you, listener, for listening to the show. Goodbye.